Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I am thrilled to be here today. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful podcast episode where we will be taking a look at Twitter. On previous episodes, I have given you all a bit of an overview of just social media marketing in general. You can go listen to that podcast if you want. Just a bit of a brief explanation on how to set up accounts, how to get the most out of those accounts, and how to really use them for your social media marketing. As well, I have also recorded an episode on how to get the most out of your Instagram profile. We went over the tips and tricks you can use to really up your game on the Instagram profile. So I thought it would be only fitting if I also made an episode focusing on Twitter. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about how to use Twitter properly, what is the correct use for Twitter, and how, even though it is no longer the most popular tool, how you can still use it to create and generate some amazing content for your social media marketing. But before all that, I just want to remind you all to please subscribe to the podcast and write a review down below. I love reading your reviews, and I love getting to hear what you think of the podcast and what you would like me to talk about next. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any opinions, or if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the review down below or reach out through social media. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm always on there. I'm always responding, and I would love to hear from you. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I want to talk about what is new and what is happening in the marketing world. Because as marketers, and as you all already know, the marketing world changes on a dime. So it's always good to stay up to date with what is new in the world. During this segment, we always try to focus on really big companies that are making really big advancements in the marketing world. So if you have a company you would like me to talk more about, or a company you want me to talk less about, please talk about that in the review down below. So to start off today, we are going to talk about Pepsi. So Pepsi is definitely a very big company in the marketing world. They are Coke's biggest competitor, and I always like to talk about Coca-Cola because I think Coca-Cola does a very strong job of keeping to their brand, but also coming up with new and innovative ideas. And I would say that Pepsi does a similar thing, that they always, have a coherent brand and that they always are trying new and innovative things. However, the story I'm about to tell you maybe shows the extent of when you should stop just trying to be innovative and maybe just find something that works instead. This is a bit of an underdog story because, gosh, I just want Pepsi to figure this out already. Like, if anyone's going to do it at this point, it's going to be Pepsi. And what I'm talking about is Pepsi is trying to make a soft drink that is also a coffee drink. So they are coming out with Pepsi Cafe Cola with coffee. It'll come in 2 different flavors, espresso and vanilla. So for those of you that don't know, or maybe you don't remember, this is not the first time Pepsi has tried this, and it probably won't be the last if this fails either. So the other ones came out. It was Pepsi-Chino and Pepsi-Kona. So those both failed horribly. Nobody really bought these products, and they did not obviously become very memorable because Pepsi's trying it again. So I don't know, maybe it will work again. The market share for ready-to-drink coffee in cans and bottles is up to 22% since 2017. So maybe there is a market for this now, right? Maybe before it just wasn't time, and maybe now it is time. I can just say, based on my own opinion of this product, I'm not into it. But I just like black coffee. I don't like anything sugary in it or anything like that. So for me, I know it wouldn't work. But maybe for you, it will work. I think the interesting thing here, and the thing we should all focus on here from the marketing perspective, is that they keep trying. So they have an idea they really like. They really want to have coffee and pop together in a can. So because of that, they know that they need to keep trying things, but they also know that they need to listen to the audience and say, that didn't work. We need to pull back, wait a while, and try again with a whole new idea. So the general format of the idea has not changed. It is coffee and pop. However, their marketing and their resources behind it have changed, and they have advanced, and they have done so by listening to their audience. So it definitely is a good lesson to take with you as marketers. However, I will be interested to see how this story advances over the next couple of months. The cans of Pepsi Cafe will be in all of your local stores by April. So when April comes around, why don't you go ahead and tweet me a photo of you drinking it, and we'll talk about it again when it comes out. Nothing we can do until we actually taste the product, right? So the next story we're going to be talking about is from another very big company in the marketing world. And I'm sure you're already able to guess which one I'm talking about because it is the biggest company in the marketing world. We're talking about Disney. So not only are we talking about Disney, we're talking about Frozen 2. So two of the biggest things that have just ever happened in the marketing world is Disney doing something and Disney doing something about Frozen 2. For those of you who don't have small children, you will for sure still know what Frozen 2 is. It was everywhere. It was on billboards. It was on commercials. It was on your phone. It was on YouTube. The cast was on every late night show talking about it. The marketing that was done for this movie was extraordinary and incredible, and something that as marketers we should all take a look at and take inspiration from, because for that month that Frozen 2 came out, it really was everywhere. And so to have that sort of publicity for a product would be huge for any of us to have. But not all publicity is good publicity. Unfortunately, Disney is being sued for using the slogan that says, "Trust your journey." So Trust Your Journey was apparently already trademarked by a breast cancer association called Trust Your Journey. They have it on T-shirts and their keychains and all of that. And it's not like it's a small foundation that Disney may not have known about. They have apparently grossed nearly $4 million in sales with their logo saying Trust Your Journey. And Disney has been using that logo quite a bit to promote Frozen 2. They have not put it on any of the movie posters or anything like that, but it has been on T-shirts and jewelry and toys and all that other stuff. And I may have seen it on a few posters. I know it wasn't on like the big box office movie posters. So Disney has not commented on this so far, but I'm sure at some point they're going to have to, or maybe this will be a lawsuit that we never hear about again. It is interesting, though, to hear a story like this, because with a budget as big as Disney's, you would think that they have lawyers scouring to find out if this trademark has been used before or if it's been copyrighted, which it was. So I definitely just think it's a lesson for all of us to take, that we should always be a little extra careful and a little extra considerate when it comes to using a slogan that maybe sounds familiar or sounds very generic, because you really never know. So definitely always check everything. The third and final story we're going to talk about today is that the Hallmark Channel has finally addressed Lori Loughlin being fired. For those of you that haven't been following this story, Lori Loughlin was a part of a crime. Lori Loughlin was a part of a scandal where she allegedly paid universities a lot of money to get her daughter into the school. And because of that, because of this ongoing lawsuit, Lori Loughlin was fired from filming a Hallmark movie that was apparently a part of a bigger series. I had never seen it, but now reading this, I understand that her being fired from the show did have some really big consequences, because fans are apparently really missing her. So Hallmark has finally reached out and said something about this. They haven't said anything about Lori Loughlin directly being fired or anything like that, but in a recent interview with Entertainment Tonight, the executive producer of the show, Alfonso Morano, said that, "I think the town of Hope Valley, like the fans of the show, miss Abigail. For both, it is about embracing the past, but learning to move forward." So that is very interesting to hear, because he's not talking about any of them specifically. He's not saying Lori Loughlin did this and that's why she was fired. Instead, he is using the character and the show to instill the idea of, yep, it happened, we're sorry, move on. So I would like to hear if any of you watched the show or if any of you have been following along with this story, if you think what he said was a good idea or if you would have responded differently. Let me know in the review down below, because I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on this. So we're going to take a quick break from our podcast, but when we return, we are going to go into an in-depth look at Twitter. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks of how to really use the platform to its full ability. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you. Get it. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and thank you for joining me today. Before the break, we talked about what is new in the marketing world. We talked about Disney facing a lawsuit for using the slogan, "Embrace your..." We talked about Disney facing a lawsuit based on a trademark phrase they were using to promote the movie Frozen 2. We talked about the Hallmark Channel finally speaking out about what happened to Lori Loughlin, and we talked about Pepsi coming out with a new coffee drink. So all three stories definitely bring something new to the marketing world that we should think about and we should consider in our own marketing. Now that we are back from our break, I want to talk about Twitter. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, I have recorded other episodes where we focused on Twitter in a general sense, and we talked about Facebook in a general sense, and I did an entire episode on Instagram. So if you're looking for inspiration on those topics, definitely go check those out. This episode will solely be focused on Twitter. So to start out, let's just give some facts on Twitter, because I feel like a lot of people think that Twitter is outdated, not a lot of people are using it anymore, and that it's something a lot of companies don't even really need to have. Well, I'm here to tell you that I think that is wrong. Twitter is still a valuable player in the social media marketing world. It is definitely not as valuable as, say, Instagram or YouTube. However, it is still a great way to generate content, build your brand, and have an open conversation about your content and about what you're trying to sell. So just for some fast facts here, every single minute, an average of 350,000 new tweets are posted on Twitter. That equals out to being 500 million tweets per day. That is a crazy amount of content being pushed through a platform that we all can just check so easily. So when you think about it, why wouldn't you want your content to be on there? With all of that going on, you definitely want the ability to be a part of it. So for a lot of people, Twitter won't seem like something that will be worth the effort, because it takes a long time to generate a following on the site, whereas Instagram and even Facebook, it can be quite easy to put ads out and create a following. Twitter is a little bit more complicated, but I think the thing to remember with Twitter is that you're not on there to generate a following. Of course, it's great if you do, and obviously all the content that you're producing is going towards an audience, but Twitter can also just be really great to get feedback from a small group of people. So don't be worried about the numbers when it comes to Twitter. Be more concerned with the content, because the content on Twitter is a lot more specific than it is on Instagram and Facebook. It's just supposed to be words. However, now in 2019, as in 2020, as I record this podcast, I'm so sorry, I meant to say 2019 there, guys. But as I recorded today, it's definitely an error if you don't post a photo or a video with your tweet. But the original purpose of Twitter really was just to have words. So when you're creating a tweet, when you're creating your content plan, keep that in mind, that Twitter really was supposed to be focused on how you say things and why you say things. So everything you put out into the Twitter universe really should have a purpose, really should have a point, whereas Instagram can be a little bit more fun and a little bit more light. This needs to be pointful, strategic, and well thought out. So I'm going to give you some tips on how you can use Twitter a little bit more effectively. And so one of the things you can do is create a mini campaign for long form content. So as I said before, Twitter doesn't allow you to just ramble on in the same way Instagram does, with like just pure nonsense coming out of you. You have a limited amount of characters to use, a limited amount of words that are going to be able to fit into that. So you really want to be thinking about what you're going to post and what you're going to post after that. So doing a little mini campaign where you plan to do 5 posts within the hour all around the same subject can make your feed look really nice and can keep other people engaged with what you're trying to say on your feed. So if you have a lot to say, if you're promoting a big promotion or a big giveaway that's coming out, don't try to fit it all into one tweet. Instead, make a little mini campaign that says, like, will keep your viewers interested, being like, read the next tweet to find out more, or read the next tweet to learn how to enter. This way, you're keeping them active. You're going to get a ton of traffic on those tweets because people are going to want to engage with that. But also, you're making it a little bit easier for people to digest your content because it's not just one long-form paragraph. And on the plus side, you get to have all the information in there that you wanted originally. Because I definitely understand the pain of writing out this beautiful tweet, putting it on Twitter, and then finding out that it's way too many characters, so you have to delete something. This way, everybody wins. So the next thing you can do to engage people on Twitter is to use Twitter polls and ask questions. So honestly, as long as your question is being asked about something to do with your brand, I don't see why you can't do this every day. That would be my only rule, is to make sure whatever you're asking is in line with your brand. If it's not, don't ask it. But it could be as loose as me going on Twitter right now and asking if you guys enjoyed listening to podcast. That is on brand for the GSMC Marketing Podcast, and it will get people engaged. People really want to engage with content. They have a lot of fun doing it, and it's a great way to get feedback from your audience in a very real and uncensored way. So you can cross-channel your marketing by getting content that you've already created on Instagram and on Facebook. Now, obviously, like I said, the content's different, but what I'm trying to say is that it's really easy on Twitter to link things, whereas it's not so easy to link things on Instagram. So if you want to link to an Instagram post, if you want to link to a Facebook post, or you want to link to a website blog, do that, because 1, the link image will show up, so it won't cost you any characters, and 2, the link actually shows up in the tweet where it doesn't on an Instagram post. So this is just another great bonus that you can use on Twitter rather than on Instagram. So if you want to make things really easy, and it's also the original idea of Twitter, is to have a custom hashtag for your brand. This way, if anyone else uses that hashtag, you're able to see what people are saying about your product, how they're responding to it, and what they're looking for next. However, it's also a great way for you just to click on a simple hashtag and then see all of the tweets you've ever created for your product. So this is a really cool and a fun idea. However, I need you to remember not to change it halfway through. So find one that is generic enough that other people can use, but is specific enough that it obviously has to do with your company. Like if I were to create a hashtag for this podcast and I just said marketing, that's not specific to what I talk about. It is, and has everything to do with the brand, but so many people are going to use the hashtag marketing that have never heard of this podcast. So that wouldn't be very strategic for me. However, doing a hashtag like the GSMC marketing or GSMC marketing hashtag, that would be great because not everyone's going to use it, but it's super simple to remember and other people can use it easily. So the next thing I want you to do that would be a helpful trick on Twitter, and tip, it's not a trick, is the same one I gave for Instagram. You need to plan your content in advance. It really is so simple, but such a hard concept. It's almost like the idea of losing weight. Like if you want to lose weight, eat less and exercise more. It's that simple. Is that easy to do? Of course not, but it's what you have to do. So is it easy to plan your content out? No. But if you want to have good content, you need to plan it out. And for Twitter, I would say plan it out 2 weeks in advance. Also, Twitter is a little bit more specific than Instagram on what like the best times to post and all that. It was recently released that the best times to post on Twitter are between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Anything out of those hours isn't going to be seen by the audience you want, so it's going to be wasted content. You do not want to waste your content on Twitter. There is so much getting pushed through every minute that it would be hard for you to lose content. I wouldn't want you to do that. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and take another short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are going to talk about Twitter a little bit more, and I'm going to give you some content ideas and suggestions on which companies you should follow. So stay tuned because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and thank you for joining me today. Before the break, we were talking about Twitter. We were going over the do's and don'ts of how to actually use the platform. We discussed how you can use polls to better engage with your audience. We talked about growing your audience by generating content that has a lot of photo and video and uses a lot of multimedia platforms. And we also discussed the best times you should be posting and how regularly you should be posting. Now that we are back from our break, I want to dive further into Twitter and talk about some companies you should be following to, one, gain inspiration from, because just like all social media, there are companies that just do it so much better than everybody else, and it is because they have really big budgets and really big teams working on it, but also it's because they understand certain things about the market that we all need to learn and we all need to take with us as we go forward in our social media journey. So I want to take a look at those so that we can create better content for you. So before I get into that, I just want to remind everyone to please subscribe to the podcast. And if you have any questions about what we talked about on today's episode, please write it in the review down below or reach out through social media. I mean, we are talking about social media, so it'd be pretty crazy if I didn't have it myself. So go follow the GSMC Marketing Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Okay, so now that we are back, let's dive into which companies you should be following on social media. The first one is my favorite company to follow across all brands. It is Starbucks. I think everyone knew I was going to say Starbucks. If you listen to this podcast, then you know my obsession with this coffee brand. Not only does it hydrate me throughout the day, it also just kills it again and again with marketing. And I'm always impressed. I'm always over the top in love with whatever they're doing, especially around the holidays. And I know the holidays are over, so it'll be interesting to see and study a little bit more closely how they do their social media marketing when there is no holiday to celebrate. But let's take a look at why you should follow them on Twitter. So one, they have 11 million followers. And that's a crazy number that we all aspire to have. And it may seem unrealistic, but hey, maybe if you follow what Starbucks does and you have a good product like Starbucks does, then you can get 1 million followers too. I'm not here to crush on your dreams. If you want 1 million followers, you can have 1 million followers. You just, 11 million followers. You just need to actually do the work in the same way Starbucks does. So the number one thing that they do, that, by the way, everyone on this list does, so if you're not doing it, you need to start doing it, is that they retweet or mention or reply to every person that replies to them. If you're on Twitter and you see the Starbucks does something and you tweet about it, they're going to like it, they're going to retweet it, or they're going to respond. No comment goes without some sort of response from the Starbucks team, which is amazing and great for a lot of reasons, but the main one being is that Twitter can seem like such a lonely place, and having a big company reach out and be like, hey, thanks for sharing our content, or hey, thanks for being our audience, can make you feel like, hey, might just be a drop in a bucket, but I'm a loud drop in the bucket, and so people care about being seen, and they care about being noticed. So make sure you make all of your followers feel noticed and feel valued, because it really is so important when it comes to Twitter. Starbucks also does a really great job of having customizable hashtags. As I talked about before, you always want to have one that is just across the board for your brand, and you'll notice on most of their posts that hashtag is just Starbucks. But they do a lot of other stuff, like for Christmas they had a hashtag that said Merry Christmas Starbucks. Super simple to remember, super easy to tweet out with any tweet, and very festive. And they know that the only people that are using it are going to be people who are talking about Starbucks. So it's specific to their brand, but it's definitely something that will catch your eye. The next company I want to talk about is PlayStation. So PlayStation has 9 million followers, which is still crazy impressive. And it's honestly for very similar reasons that Starbucks does, just in a different way. They're also always engaging with their fans and retweeting them and making sure that they know and feel loved and like they are engaged with the content rather than the content just being shouted at them. But what they also do is they use a wide variety of media. So you'll never just see words getting tweeted out on PlayStation's Twitter. You'll always see some sort of video, photo, GIF, or animation attached to the tweet. And honestly, that fits their brand. They're a video game console. So, of course, they're going to have video game features on their tweets. Everything they do should have some level of excitement in the same way their games do. The next company I want to talk about, and the last company I want to talk about, is Whole Foods. Whole Foods does something that these other companies do a little bit, but they try to do all the time, and it's something I really want to encourage you guys to do, is that they don't just try to sell. They try to educate. So Whole Foods is a very organic, homegrown, healthy eating store, and so with all of their marketing that they do on Twitter at least, they don't want to just sell you the food. They want to sell you the reason why you should be buying their food. This is so much healthier for you. Buy this. That's not healthy for you. Don't buy it again. You won't find it at our stores. So what they're doing is that they're not telling you you should shop here, you want to shop here. They're saying you need to shop here. We want the best for you, and we are the best for you. But they don't just tell it, they show it. And that's a really big deal on Twitter, because Twitter can be just a lot of talking, or it can actually show who you are as a company and what you actually want, which is an amazing gift to have on a platform, and an amazing gift to have as marketers, so that we can really show what we got and what we want and what we expect from our product and what people should expect from our product. Okay, everyone, that is it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing your review down below. I can't wait to read them and hear your guys' thoughts on the Twitter podcast. If you have any questions about your own Twitter marketing or about anything I talked about today on the podcast, feel free to reach out through social media, because I would love to answer any questions you have, or just to discuss more about the topic. Let's move this conversation over to Twitter. So definitely go and follow us on the GSMC Marketing Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook profiles. I'm over there, and I'm waiting to start a conversation. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and it was lovely talking to you today.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.